Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That D Plus Show. Classes in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up, and our general impressions. If you like the show, we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Joining me today, once again, Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cam?
Hey, what's going on?
What's going on is you and I literally like 10 minutes ago just finished the season finale of Loki Season 2, Glorious Purpose. So we're going to sit down and kind of give our thoughts on that episode as well as the season as a whole. We're doing this as part of our Marvel month here, but obviously because Loki is the newest MCU thing to finish and wrap up. Diving into our history lesson on this one. Episodes were released here between October 5th and November 9th, 2023. We had a runtime between 47 and 56 minutes. That was at least for the first 5 episodes. I don't think the last episode was longer than that, but I was not paying attention. So I imagine it's somewhere in that range. In our MCU TV timeline of things, we had June through July of last year, we had Miss Marvel. Then August through October, we had She-Hulk. We had, on October 7th of last year, we had the Werewolf by Night special presentation, followed by the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special on November 25th last year. And then it was pretty quiet on the Marvel TV front up until Secret Invasion, June through July of this year. And then here we have Loki Season 2. Currently, at least according to Wikipedia, What If Season 2 is still slated for a late December 2023 release, but who knows if that will actually hit or not. But we do have confirmation that Echo will be dropping all 5 episodes of their season on January 10th, 2024. And then the future of the MCU TV is up in the air. Agatha Darkhold Diaries, which I believe is like the 3rd name that show has had now, is currently slated for a late 2024 release, with Ironheart having been pushed to 2025, and Daredevil Born Again also pushed to 2025. We'll see if any of those bump up their timeline now that, as we are recording this, the actors' strike has been seemingly resolved, or at least assuming all goes according to plan with the votes and everything.
Yep.
And I did see already that Disney's come out and basically like shifted some of their movie slate. So I think next year, Deadpool 3 is the only film slated for next year. I think everything else got pushed to 2025.
I believe so, yeah. I think everything else got pushed, yeah. And they're not the only ones, too. Like, a lot of studios finalized their slate for pushing 2024 to 2025, so.
Yeah. So it's gonna be a quiet year next year for the MCU, it seems.
Probably a great year for indie movies, though. A24 and a lot of other independent studios had their tentative deals, so we're probably going to get a lot of really cool indie movies then.
Yeah, here's hoping.
Unless all those indie movies suck.
Well, it's more, how many of those indie movies are getting theatrical releases versus how many of them are going straight to some streaming platform or something like that. And even the ones that do get theatrical releases, how well are they going to perform in a time where even the big blockbusters weren't putting a lot of butts in seats this last year?
Yeah, but I'm just like thinking, what else is there?
Yeah.
That's well, maybe they'll do a lot of like older movies coming back, like maybe a lot of like Alamo's Draft House type shows.
As it is, like the box office top 10 the last couple weeks had like a Nightmare Before Christmas re-release in it, so it'll be interesting to see. Anyway, our roll call of Loki Season 2 here. We had the directing duo of Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead, who directed 4 of the episodes this season: Ouroboros, Heart of the TVA, Science/Fiction, and the finale here, Glorious Purpose. They'd also previously worked on projects like The Endless, Synchronic, and Moon Knight, ahead of Loki here. Dan DeLue directed the episode Breaking Brad. And historically, this was, I believe, one of their first directing projects. They're typically a visual effects supervisor, having worked on many MCU projects, including Iron Man 3, Captain America Winter Soldier, Captain America Civil War, and Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, as well as the first season of Loki. Where I believe he's also, the next one is the production designer. Kasra Farahani directed episode 1893, the third episode of the season. They are predominantly a concept artist, having worked on stuff like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 and Black Panther, and they were the production designer for Loki, in addition to directing that episode. Our writers here, Eric Martin directed the Ouroboros Breaking Bad, or wrote, sorry. He wrote on every episode. Ouroboros Breaking Bad, 1893, Heart of the TVA, Science/Fiction, and A Glorious Purpose. He also wrote a lot of Loki Season 1 stuff, as well as projects like Heels and Dead by Midnight, Why to Kill, whatever that is. Kasra Farahani also has a writing credit on 1893, as does their writing partner Jason O'Leary, having also worked on projects like Tilt, a project called Tilt prior to this. And then Catherine Blair wrote the Heart of the TVA episode, having also been just a staff writer on Loki Season 2 here. And then also credited Michael Waldron with the Created for Television by credit, having been the primary writer and showrunner of Loki Season 1. And then they went off to write Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and they also work on the series Heels. Our cast of characters here, of course, Tom Hiddleston as Loki, having played Loki since Thor in 2011. So that's 12 years with this character at this point. Also in something like Kong Skull Island and a number of other projects in his repertoire. Sophia Di Martino playing and returning as Sylvie, having been in projects like Flowers, Into the Badlands, and Yesterday prior to her turn in Loki Season 1. Owen Wilson, of course, as Mobius/Dawn, now that we know his sacred timeline name. We touched on him during Haunted Mansion, but he's been in projects like Armageddon, Shanghai Noon and Nights, Zoolander, The Royal Tenenbaums, Wedding Crashers, Cars, Night at the Museum, Loki, and, most recently, Haunted Mansion. Wunmi Mosaku playing Hunter B-15 and Dr. Willis, having been in projects like Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, Horizon Zero Dawn, and Lovecraft Country, in addition to Loki and, more recently, Alice Darling. Eugene Cordero gets promoted this year in his role as Casey/Frank Morris, having been in projects like The Good Place, Kong Skull Island, Loki, and Star Trek Lower Decks. Ke Huy Quan playing Obi/AD Doug, PhD, of course, known from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, Goonies, and the recent Academy Award winner for Everything Everywhere All at Once, as well as on the other Disney Plus show, American Born Chinese. Rafael Casal is Hunter X5/Brad Wolf, having been in projects like the Blind Spotting movie, Are You Afraid of the Dark, the reboot of that series, and the Blind Spotting series, as well as Loki here, of course. Gugu Mbatha-Raw playing Ravonna Renslayer once again, having been in projects like Belle, Beyond the Lights, Concussion, the live-action Beauty and the Beast, and A Wrinkle in Time, in addition to Loki. Tara Strong as Miss Minutes. She's done, of course, all the voices, notably Bubbles in Powerpuff Girls, Harley Quinn in the Arkham games, Raven in Teen Titans Go, and we recently shouted her out in last week's episode as the replacement mainframe in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And Jonathan Majors as Victor Timely and He Who Remains, having been in projects like The Last Black Man in San Francisco, Lovecraft Country, Quantum Mania, and Creed, as well as Loki here. A little bit of trivia here, just pulling kind of episode by episode. for this season in the Ouroboros episode. The post-credits tease that led Sylvie to Broxton, Oklahoma, is a nod to the location where New Asgard found a home in the comics following Ragnarok there. Casey is heard in that first episode listening to a snippet of a podcast called Staying Awake, which is the same snippet that we heard Stephen Grant listen to in Moon Knight. So kind of doing a little bit of cross tie over there. In the episode Breaking Brad, Mobius and Loki walk by a poster of a 1977 Kingo Bollywood production as a nod to Kumail Nanjiani's Eternals character and the lineage of his quote-unquote family being eternal Bollywood stars. And then also Zaniac and Brad Wolfe is a nod to that character in the comics, who was, I pulled this off of some other site, so I'm trusting that they were not lying to me. But according to the comics, Brad Wolfe was transformed by radiation from the Manhattan Project and gained superhuman strength and the ability to create knives of energy, and was a foe of Thor in his Zaniac alter ego. 1893, obviously we get a fun little ragtime player piano version of the Marvel theme to open up that episode. And then of note, in case you missed it, Renslayer delivers the TVA guide to young Victor on the Sacred Timeline, which creates a branched timeline when we revisit him in the titular 1893 later on in the episode, which then ties back to the end of the series here, where we see young Victor not get that TVA notebook on the Sacred Timeline. So interesting stuff there. In our Heart of the TVA episode, Obi makes a direct reference to his namesake Ouroboros with his line about a snake eating its own tail. And additionally, obviously, Obi's model is a very obvious reference to Back to the Future and Doc Brown's model of Hill Valley. Similarly, we get a nod to the character Dennis Nedry in Jurassic Park when Miss Minutes takes over the temp pads and basically says, you've been, kicked out. Doesn't say, you forgot the secret word like Nedry does, but... in the episode Science/Fiction, we get a fun reveal where Casey is revealed to have been Frank Morris, one of 3 men to escape Alcatraz prison on June 11th, 1962, never to be seen or heard from again. His co-escapees, Clarence and John Anglin, are played by Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead, the directors of many of Season 2's episodes. So a little cameo for them. We also get a confirmation that B-15's Sacred Timeline character is Verity Willis, who's a character from the comics who, through, circumstances that I don't quite understand that involve, like, eating and digesting a magical stone as a child, but she can basically see through lies. And so she and Loki have a whole relationship where she knows exactly when he's lying and can call him on his bullshit. In A.D. Doug's workshop, in the science fiction episode, there's a New York Giants baseball hat a la the hat Short Round wears in Temple of Doom on one of the computers in the background. So fun little set dressing Easter egg there. And in Sylvie's timeline, branch timeline, there is a Zaniac arcade game, referencing, of course, the Zaniac film from the earlier episode that Brad was promoting, and the post-credits tease on that episode is like Brad saying "Game over, you lose, game over, loser, give another quarter" or something like that. Some video game arcade kind of line. And then finally here, Glorious Purpose. Don't have like good trivia because again we just watched it, but Glorious Purpose was also the name of the very first episode of season 1. So a nice kind of full circle. Snake eating its own tail there with the season names or the episode names of the first and presumably last episodes of the series. We get, of course, Loki crafting what very much appears to be the Yggdrasil world tree as he becomes possibly the god of stories, which is another nod to one of his arcs in the comics. But he is most definitely burdened with glorious purpose. He got what he always wanted there at the end. And obviously, we also got a nod to the events of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, when Mobius references that one of the He Who Remains variants was popped up and caused some trouble in the 616 adjacent universe, where, of course, we saw Kang the Conqueror fended off by Ant-Man and the Wasp. So Cam, what did you think here of season 2 of Loki?
There is so much about Loki that I think is so unique and so original that can only really be done with the kind of scale that they started with in season 1, and I think absolutely fulfill this time around in season 2. It is a level of production that we don't see out of any of the other MCU products. I feel like MCU Disney Plus products.
Mm-hmm.
There is a level of commitment to a vision that feels ubiquitous and feels like everything is so intentional and so finely focused down to like a fine, precise point and edge. No second feels like a second missed or wasted. It feels like it's so consistent and so intentional with every single thing that it's doing. And I think that it just hits on just about every single possible cylinder. It may not be the most like exciting or action-packed episode, but there's always something about the plot moving forward. And I think it fulfills a very like basic but very critical story criteria, which is plot shouldn't be and then happens. It should be because or therefore, as like how the next story beat's coming up. There is never a and then moment in any, I feel like any Loki episode. I feel like there is always just a because or therefore going forward with it. Like, and then we find out that there's this guy named OB. And it's like, no, there's an issue going on with time slipping. The only person who could possibly know is this guy named OB. Therefore, Mobius and Loki go down there and talk to OB. And, like, there's just, like, that's a very basic instance of this, but there's never not an instance of that. And I feel so strongly about how great that this does and how it accomplishes what it does. The only comparison I can possibly make is I feel like this is like the Andor to like what Andor is to the Star Wars Disney Plus stuff. I feel like this is what that is to the Marvel stuff on Disney Plus. It's its own thing. It's its own vehicle, and what it builds on, what it shares with, and what it does is its own. Like it is its own. It lives on its own, and it's on its own as far as like the merits that it gains and the characters that it builds. It doesn't just borrow from here or there. It really has an intention with how it builds up its characters, that even a character like Casey, who is kind of like is this character even important, builds up over time. Not just like a comedic relief, not just like another member of the TVA. And it's what's really impressive is that there never felt like there was ever a miscellaneous member of the TVA. Every single member of the TVA that was introduced that's like a named character has something to fulfill in the long run. If you look at beginning to end, I was thinking about this as I was watching the credits. I don't think there's a single character that didn't have a pivotal point to play, or had like some like what was a minor character introduced ends up becoming a major, like not a major character, but has something happen because of decisions and actions that took place over the season.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone had an arc.
This season, definitely. I would say like the one that Brad prunes in the last episode, in like episode 4 or 5 or whatever it was, while they were getting hot chocolate. I guess that would have been episode 4. I feel like even though he was like a character from season 1, like I didn't really remember him at all. He just kind of was like the other hunter that they had kind of around. Yeah, and there were a few of those other kind of like season 1 hunters that kind of didn't really end up amounting to, certainly by comparison to either what we get from kind of Brad this season or from obviously B-15.
B-15 has like one of the best arcs from her introduction in season 1, episode 1 of Loki to where she ends up at the end of season 2.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant character arc from a character I really didn't care much about.
Yeah, I mean she's the one that brings Loki in the first episode.
Yeah. She kickstarts it, and it's to see her then get to a point where like there's a lot of like sadness, like there's some sadness to this last episode, and it's not sadness in a way that it's like, oh no, heartbreak. It's like this is like, it's a very bittersweet thing. Mm-hmm. And Loki, like, it's amazing also how they tease you, like, this is how we're going to solve it, or this is how we're going to do it. Mm-hmm. And then the actual answer is completely not that whatsoever.
Yeah.
They're so good at that.
We'll definitely talk about it like when we focus on this particular episode. But yeah, the sequence where in the final episode there, where it's like centuries later. So like obviously he's been through this so many times. He's like, and we see him, how efficiently he's worked everything out, and how like he knows, hey, don't do this kind of thing. And we get that moment for him of like, finally, this is finally the time. And then another thing goes wrong. And I kept waiting for that. What is going to go wrong this time? I was thinking it was going to be okay. Yeah. He gets it off, and then Timely doesn't get back because if he gets it off, he doesn't need to get back. So fine,
Timely's fulfilled his narrative purpose. Yeah. And they totally mess with it.
And it kept going and going and going, and finally we get like, these readings aren't right, and I'm like, there's the shoe dropping kind of thing. And yeah, then we go into okay, yep, because like that whole thing, I'm thinking, okay, I think before Loki does in the scene, like, you clearly got to go back further to like, yeah, like clearly just going back to that spot, you're not going to get done quick enough. You got to like, and then going back further. It got to a point where I was like, is he going to go back to like Mobius going out the first time somehow? And like, that's when they're going to, obviously they can't do that because they need the piece that Timely has and whatnot. And so it's like, okay, yeah, they got to factor that stuff in. And so, yeah, they ultimately, like, I like that then it goes to, okay, yeah, we got to go all the way back to the He Who Remains stuff and even further back there and stuff. And so, yeah, I like this very much. I was finding a lot of episodes this week or this season, very Doctor Who like.
Yes, very.
They
turned Loki into Doctor Who. It's great.
Yeah, yeah. A couple times I was very like, it's not when, where, or why, it's not what, where, or why. It's who, and I just kept waiting.
Yeah.
The TARDIS noise coming in or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there was a lot. Speaking of Doctor Who, for a long time, especially after like Avengers, obviously like in the early MCU days, Loki was the far and away favorite in terms of like best villain. And then I remember when the Netflix series started coming out, and I remember specifically thinking with Jessica Jones, like the amount of time we got with David Tennant as the Purple Man, like, oh, suddenly he's now my favorite of the MCU villains because we just got the most time with him. Mm-hmm. Like he, quickly surpassed even the time that we'd spent with Loki in, his couple Thor movies at that point and the Avengers. And then over the years, it hasn't like, you've had maybe like Kingpin kind of rises up in his Daredevil stuff as like a front runner. And then Josh Brolin was very good in Thanos, especially in like his main outing there in Infinity War. And obviously Michael B. Jordan was great as Killmonger kind of thing. And it took like Loki coming back, and even though obviously Loki isn't a villain in this series, but it's very much like he comes back and immediately it's like Tom Hiddleston is just so good in this role, and just such a great performer overall. And the show very much gets to play with the length of time we have seen him play this role, and
Yeah.
the growth we've seen of the character, even when this show very much is like a reset point for the character. Obviously, we're getting a version of Loki that, you know, doesn't go through Thor 2 or Ragnarok or Infinity War. And so to get but at this point we've spent more time with this Loki than with, you know, Loki Prime or whatever. So I love that we still are able to have the growth with Loki and Tom Hiddleston's great performance there, and it's just not it has become this like buddy work comedy kind of thing, or not work comedy necessarily. There are some little bits with him and Mobius, but like a buddy work show compared to him and Thor butting heads and whatnot. And yeah, just he a standout through so much of this, but yeah, the last few episodes in particular, I've just been like, yeah, he's so good.
He's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this season in particular, I mean, I tweeted out basically at the beginning of the season, like, how sad it is that the Hollywood system's so broken that we didn't get Ke Huy Quan and his just like delightful, infectious energy for a couple decades. Because obviously, since coming back onto the scene with Everything Everywhere All at Once, he reminds everyone why Data and Short Round are two of such beloved characters.
They're all-time 80s classic characters, and
Yeah.
they're played by the same guy, and it just shows that the only thing keeping him from acting his entire life was racism.
Yeah.
So racism and prejudice. So like, as if they didn't have enough of a reason not to exist, it kept us from getting Ke Huy Quan for our entire lives.
Yeah. I mean, even in American Born Chinese, he pops up in that and is a lot of fun in that. And in like, he's just bringing goodness to the table. And so like when he comes in and he is admittedly doing very much the same kind of expositional dump that he does in Everything Everywhere All at Once, but it is like, it's a beat that he can clearly do very, very well. And this show isn't like asking him to do a whole bunch of like crazy action, but it is giving us fun character beats and fun exposition. Like, I love the reveal of him as like a failed science fiction author in like his, you know, real world kind of role. But he immediately gets on board, uses his also degrees in theoretical physics to build temp pads, and like he can understand everything that, you know, is in the TVA and all that stuff. And so yeah, there's like, he was obviously a clear like standout in terms of like additions to the show this year, even if it does come at the cost of, you know, maybe I would have liked more Sylvie than we get this season. Because it just, the ensemble very much kind of settling into the ensemble we get here.
Yeah.
So much of what I loved of the first season ended up being like the Loki and Sylvie relationship and dynamic. And they're very much, obviously, because of the end of the season 1 finale, they're at odds for most of the series. Even, like they, you know, come to a tempered truce kind of thing, but they're nowhere near as close as they were, you know, at the end of last season kind of thing before she killed He Who Remains.
I'm trying to, but I also think that's part of it is like at that time they were also both trying to play each other, and this is the first time where they're both not playing. Like this season, they're not really playing each other. They both have cards on the table, and they aren't really hiding anything.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, they're much more like open about who they are now. But I because they had such different goals for a lot of this season, I think that it kept them more apart than I would have liked.
I think that's fair. Well, it's interesting. I think they had the same no, because Sylvie, like, yeah, no, you're right. Okay, I take it back. You're right. It clicked for me just then. I was like, yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like, let's just jump back. Like, what are some of your highlights of the season? Favorite moments, favorite episodes?
funny enough, seeing everybody's variant, like what variant they're from.
Yeah, it's immediately where I go to too. Is like seeing the like backstory of all these characters, especially like the Alcatraz thing was a fun like kind of echo of the DB Cooper stuff we got from season 1.
Yeah.
And as somebody who has done the like audio tour of Alcatraz, I was like enjoying just like the little, you know, very specific details they include in there, including like, you know, they faked that they were in their bunks with paper mache heads, and they had little holes in the wall that you could see, you know, if you go to Alcatraz, because the Alcatraz closed like a year after that event. And you know, the prevailing theory is they didn't actually make it, and they, you know,
they drowned in the
or
bay.
whatever. But the fact that this that episode kind of plays with them making it up to Angel Island as like, which was their, you know, ultimate destination kind of thing, is like that's a neat what if, you know, what if they did really get away with it, and then Casey got snatched up and became a TVA agent.
It's great. It's such a there's so much about that that's really good. And I also really enjoyed just like we get to see the fulfillment of the water ski thing, the jet ski.
Yeah, yep.
The jet ski.
Although, as he highlights, not on a jet ski, he's on a Sea-Doo. And he highlights earlier in the season, actually, jet ski is the brand name kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so it's like, see, it's that thing that everybody's complaining about, like Adidas clearly paid for product placement in Spider-Man 2 over Nike or something like that. And it's like, well, clearly Sea-Doo paid more than jet ski was willing to pay for the product placement there. But yeah, that was a fun, especially like, the wacky waving inflatable arm man guy kind of thing. And that moment where like Loki comes out of it and he's just mimicking that kind of pose. Yeah. Great stuff.
It's small moments like that bring a lot of humor to otherwise like very quick paced scenes.
Mm-hmm.
But there's seeing Casey, seeing OB, like it will never be like, that is one of the most like saddest things I've ever seen.
Somebody trying to buy their own book.
Yeah, trying to buy their own book that they put in the store, and so like it's not actually being sold.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, he planted his own book, is trying to buy his own book for cash, and just gets busted for it. And then you find out he has like a bunch of these books. And I'm just like, as somebody who tried to be a writer at one point in my life, like a professional author, like I see what could have been, and it's not fun.
Yeah, and he's a little bit ahead of his time in the self-publishing realm.
Absolutely.
Like his timeline there is like 1994. So just hold out a few more years, and then this thing at Amazon's going to pop up, and you can just go nuts there. My guy. His as a little trivia nod, the self-publisher or whatever is KQB, I believe, which the theory is Ki Hui Kwan books.
That's cool.
As like a little nod to the performer there.
Yep. Also, I love that he's like, yeah, you know, well, he goes, when I'm not, like, I'd have to quit my actual job. He goes, oh, you have a job? You're like, yeah, but professor of quantum physics at Berkeley or whatever. Like, great, just great stuff. Like overall, top to bottom, just man. And then
you built a temp pad already. It was 18 months. Well, 19. I had to take a month while I moved out because I lost my house and job, and my wife divorced me.
My wife's
it's like, oh, what a sad story there.
Yep. So also shout out to B12, who is B13,
B15.
B15. I was like, there's a number here I'm missing. But B15, who is like a pediatrician and like this hard ass. Like ready to like delete you at a moment's notice person, is her real self as a like kind-hearted pediatrician who is there helping little kids who break their limbs. Like, like what a great moment of being like, no, who she is now that we're seeing is who she has always been. It's what she was being forced to do with the TVA that turned her into that person. And we also see the same thing with Brad. Brad, when he's able to his own devices, he's a charismatic like he's successful as an actor. And like we see, so like these people really are good at what they were doing before, but they also like have a life that they were doing. Yeah. And
that's that, like
they're robbed of it.
And that's the like Mobius's whole thing is like, I'm more worried about like it's a good life, or it's a it's a good life I've left behind. That's why I don't want it. That's why I don't want to know what's out there. If it's a bad life, fine. Then yeah, this is the only life. This is what I'm meant to do, kind of thing.
And then he
And
finds that it was the best life.
yeah, it is like his is one of those. There are a couple like timeline things of like, oh, it's interesting that you said that specific year, because like yeah, with B-15, she's specifically in New York helping a child with a broken arm in 2012. So right before Loki's about to try and destroy New York City.
Yep.
And then Dawn's timeline is 2022, which is like 4 years into the blip. And so it's the idea of like, is he a single dad because his wife got dusted?
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
I thought he said something about his wife leaving him.
I mean, in a way, it's like we don't know, but yeah, it's very much like the like, oh, what does that life look like outside of this little pocket bubble that we're looking at? And yeah, if he goes back to it and she comes back in a year, maybe they get a happily ever after kind of thing. So who knows?
Man, but also like so sad seeing like his worst fear comes true. Mobius's worst fear comes true.
Mm-hmm.
That he was torn away from a happy life.
Yeah. I also love the like even his kids. There's like a parallel between like Thor and Loki in them.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
There's that's a fun joy to that. One kid being like destructive, breaking things, another kid being like the more reserved, who really wants a snake, kind of thing.
Oh my gosh! I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. They're so good. They're so good, man.
They did a lot of good with the writing on this one. And that, to what your point was earlier of like this, I'll say like from a production standpoint, ultimately I agree with you, but I think WandaVision did give it a run for its money.
For sure.
As like from its production design, especially like the faithfulness and homages
you're right.
to like the original era, but the look and feel of the TVA is such a unique like pocket dimension here of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that and you even get like the hints of it that because obviously the place we go to with Obi's variant, like that is his office.
Yeah, it's his office.
It's the exact same set and layout, and we see like so many elements of it, and the tech that is there, it's very much like he is building the TVA with like mid 90s technology, and that's why we see that kind of technology and whatnot across the rest of the TVA.
Yeah, the computers and stuff, but we also see but like there's also the amazing way that it feels 50s, 70s, and 90s all at once. Mm-hmm. Whether it's style, like the uniform, like don't think we ever got to talk about it, but like the way that they succinctly make you feel like the coffee vending machine feels like something out of the 50s, but not the 50s legitimately, but like what the sci-fi vision of the future from the 50s would look like.
Yeah.
The pie room, the room it's all key lime pie.
Yeah. Pulling from the new Rockstars like Easter egg in-depth video, the hot chocolate machine, it costs 1 token, and the key lime pies cost 3 tokens. So apparently they have some kind of like work currency, pulling back even to prior to the 50s, and it's very much like a work camp kind of thing on the TVA.
They really are enslaved.
Yeah, pretty much. But they get some kind of token currency that they can go use for their coffee or their hot chocolate or their key lime pies. It's very much like, especially it is specifically my jam because one of my very favorite like aesthetics in anything is Fallout. The like retro futuristic kind of thing, the what the 50s thought the future was going to look like kind of thing. And I love how much this very much plays with that.
I would say it can interesting, this parallel to it is the way that Deathloop is the way that the people in the 70s thought the future was going to look like and be.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of methodology of it. Like,
or like Control,
Control,
has
perfect,
very
yeah.
much that same aesthetic.
Yep.
That
sterile 50s corporate aesthetic.
Yeah.
It's so good. So that's why, like, I don't think you're wrong. I think WandaVision in a lot of ways actually is better than Loki production-wise. But, and I think that has more to do with the shift that happens between the different eras and the way that they make those succinctly feel.
Yeah, I mean, well, like they're very much copying very specific reference points of 60s television, 50s television, 60s television, 70s television kind of thing. And, up into the Malcolm in the Middle kind of episode and stuff in the 90s even. And so so I think WandaVision kind of gets like a little bit of a like cheat code leg up in their design, whereas Loki very much is they had a vision for how the TVA should look and how it should feel, and they just built on that a
Nailed
lot,
it
especially this season a lot, since we spent so much more time in the TVA.
Spent so much more time in the TVA, and also different styles and variations of the TVA, with it being like with Loki bouncing between the different like time points in the TVA. We got to see like more of the TVA too. We got to see OB's office. We got to see the loom. Everything. It's great.
Yeah. The headquarters office or whatever it was that like Loki, prunes the bit at the beginning, so we get to see like that was, I think, even just that from the opening of this season, the first episode, it was like I remember theorizing so much, at the end of the last season. Oh, Sylvie, bamped him into an alternate timeline where Kang just kind of like ruled with an iron fist and didn't have to deal with creating the time gods or whatever.
That's where everybody thought we were going to start at, and it just
and so it's like no, he went back to an earlier time in the TVA, but in that still in the sacred timeline or whatever, like wherever we are in the TVA's kind of thing. And so like seeing in the reveal that it was like that Kang basically at some point covered up the future of who he was and whatnot.
Well, that's what we thought, but then we find out that era that he's in jumping back to is actually right before the TVA is destroyed.
Is it?
Yeah, because he finds out, he says at the end of it, he goes, "I'm not in the past, I'm in the future."
He goes into the future in that moment. Like,
was it just in that moment?
My reading of it is he starts that episode and he ended the first season in the past. Then he bounced back forward to where Mobius kind of ended up, and then is kind of like bouncing through time a lot. And then at the
you're right.
At the end, he's in the future where basically like the loom's about to explode, and that's his like I'm in the future now.
For some reason, in my head,
he gets pulled back when Mobius goes out there the first time and flings him back in.
I thought he was the one in my head. I didn't realize. I thought it was he created a time loop where he's the one that destroys it, but he also is the one that witnesses it.
Yeah.
And now I'm realizing, no, you're right. Here's the thing. I didn't realize he was bouncing like between all three. Oh my gosh. The whole thing with Mobius in the first episode, going to show you your past, your present, and your future.
Yeah.
He's bouncing between the past, the present, and the future. Oh my gosh. Show.
Cause like the one of the giveaways is like Mobius like freaking out about losing his skin or whatever. And so at one point, like he writes skin on the thing, and Loki is in the future because he sees skin has already been written on the computer in dust or whatever. But I mean, like even that, like I could definitely benefit from rewatching the whole season now, given all of the time stuff that they play around with. But I did like that, like in this final episode in particular, like they do all of that legwork. They take you to all of the points that they need to take you to, and they show you all of the things they need to take you to be able to follow along the amount of time loops that he's doing and all that stuff. And I love that even once they've started doing that, they kind of still play with the format of it like when we get that great moment where Loki and He Who Remains break the loop and pause this fight and everything.
Oh, it's so good.
And like they have their conversation, and then Loki like, you know, pauses himself and says, what makes you think this isn't the first time we've had this conversation, kind of thing. So like we get kind of that like, oh, the shoe's on the other foot. Yay for our hero Loki having, you know, the you know, leg up on He Who Remains, but then He Who Remains still being like, well, you still lose. and Loki's like, I know, damn it. Yeah, like I very much loved this episode. I think probably more than any other felt like a very much Doctor Who things, and I can think of very specific, you know, Doctor Who episodes where they've played with that like Groundhog's Day kind of vibe of I'm going to learn everything I need to learn. Groundhog's Day, Palm Springs is another film from the last couple of years that does that really fun and really interesting way. And I like that. Yeah, they give us enough snippets, kind of, you know, early on to be like, okay, this clearly isn't working. We need to try to do this thing. So now he's going back and he's, you know, he's doing the whole fast forwarding through Obi and Victor Timely meeting, and like just kind of going through that whole thing and reciting everything that we saw 2 episodes ago, and
oh my gosh,
just kind of fast forwarding through all that to try and buy as much time as he can. And then he knows when that doesn't work, okay, how long is it going to take me to know all of the things you know, Obi? Centuries later.
Oh my gosh, it's so good.
It's like so it very much becomes, I think, like Loki has always very much been a tragic character over the course of the series, and that is just even more so that he spent centuries going through that cycle and trying to perfect it and, you know, work out every variable, and he finally thinks he's got it right, and still it wasn't enough, and he has to do the He Who Remains stuff, and does that so many times that he figures out how to pause time and whatever he has to do there still isn't enough. So he finally kind of has that conversation with Sylvie and realizes that like he needs to be the one to make the sacrifice. Like he's not going to play by He Who Remains' rules. He's not going to kill Sylvie. He's going to be at the end of time in the way that He Who Remains basically said. And so it's especially coming off of the prior episode where the why for him ends up being to save his friends, who admittedly, again, like they've been his friends for a few weeks of like, you know, showtime in time kind of thing.
Yeah, but also those are like the real first friends he has.
Exactly, yeah.
Like growing up in Asgard is a warrior culture that looks down on Loki constantly for being a trickster, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so he for the first time ever has people who appreciate him for who he is. Mm-hmm. And even after he betrays them, forgives them. Like Mobius forgives Loki. Yeah. He decided to trust in Loki, and Loki has gone through so much from like, it's so great. I love Loki. Tom Hiddleston as Loki is one of the best casting choices that Kenneth Branagh ever made. It is by far paid off in dividends.
Wild that he auditioned and you know, for Thor as well.
He almost got Thor.
Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah, definitely crazy. But yeah, no, Tom Hiddleston has done such a great thing. And here's the thing. It's interesting because now that I'm thinking about it, he didn't waste learning everything that Obi knew about quantum physics and everything like that.
Oh, yeah.
Because he's using it now as the He Who Remains.
Yeah.
And also, I loved how, oh God, there's so many great moments in that where his new outfit, mm-hmm. which is not, it's still Loki, but it's not the regalia of past Loki. It's not the you know, the long adornments, the enormous crown. It's true to who he is, and you know, of course, the crown, like the horns are pretty big, but it's such a great choice because there's so many basic things about it that aren't extravagant. And how does somebody like Loki, who's a Norse god, how does he think of time, and how does he think of dimensions and space? And for him to pull it all together to make a tree rather than a ring or a loop.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. And also, like, we see fact that he's monitoring all the different timelines and
all the branches
of
the
tree
instead of the branches of the sacred timeline now. I love, like, one of the first images we get back in the TVA is like watering the tree now, and like on the monitor you see like the tree timeline instead of like the the linear timeline. Yeah, it's lovely that, like, he gets that ending where he can be what all of his friends need him to be, and it's sad that it's like he's still destined to do it alone. And
he's destined to end up alone. Yeah. That's the sad part, is either he dies or he lives alone. And it's funny enough, it ties back into the old man Loki version from season 1, where he says, I found a small planet, lived out the rest of my days there until, they found me eventually. Like, the fact that it's like the way that they put out, they're like Lokis are destined to end up alone.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the reason why he chooses to be alone in this. And also it all speaks to, he's finally become the kind of king that he was always capable of being. And he's finally becomes a king that his father knew he could be, in an interesting way. Because, like, at this point now, he's given up all ego. It's not about his ego. It's not about needing to be in charge. It's not because he thinks he's the best person for it. It's because he knows he's the only one who can. And he makes that decision. He finally becomes this king that Odin knew he could be. And he finally fulfills himself into the Loki we saw in Thor Ragnarok, who becomes the kind of brother that Thor always knew he could be as well. Like, he's finally fulfilling the kind of, like, the only person that ever really got into Loki's way was Loki.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, by putting his ego aside and taking up this role, and now here's the thing, he's now, quote unquote, the most powerful god ever now.
Yeah, I mean, like,
he's the god of time and space.
Yeah. And that's like, in doing a lot of the, like, watching a lot of, like, the little Easter egg videos for this season stuff, a lot of them started touching on this storyline that Loki has in the comics, where he realizes that a lie is just a story, and so he basically rewrites himself, instead of being the god of lies and mischief, as the god of stories.
That's cool.
And so that's what I was kind of alluding to there in the trivia, is very much like he's taking everything he's learned, he's taking everything he's known, and he isn't interested in being the trickster god anymore. He is evolving beyond that,
far beyond
in a very cool way. And yeah, like, as he's, like, stopping time left and right in this, I'm like, how powerful are they going to make him? Like, how are they going to take him off the board for future MCU things? Oh, they're going to stick him at the end of time in the Yggdrasil's tree, that is all of the multiverse weaved together. Cool.
It's crazy, man. It's so crazy. And also, like, the hint that they're hunting down more kings and, like, all this stuff. Like, we have real life issues in regards to that, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Any other moments or things you want to give a shout out to or think about?
The moment that he shares with Sylvie when he freezes time and he tells her outside of time and space, and he kind of presents to her his impossible choice, and you're like, what's going to happen here? And then she just looks at him like snark, like snark.
I'm not going to give you my blessing.
I'm not going to give you my blessing. That's what you're waiting for. Yeah. And he goes, and that moment, it's like, it's crazy, because it's not just like, oh, is this like a, well, they want, it's like no, they're the same person.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like, he went through endless times trying to fight her, and her response was always the same. If you want to stop me, you're going to have to kill me. That never changed for her. That was never going to change for her. But yeah, I love that her sentiment there of, like, I grew up in apocalypses, like, it's better that they have a world we can fight for, which ultimately is what Loki gives them. Mm-hmm. And I love that like, that ends up being what gets through and what sinks and what leads him to make the decision. Because like there was very much we were seeing so much in the opening bit of like, well, it's always got to be timely. He's always the one that's got to go down there. And I'm like, that's the problem. Like, it's not. And again, I'll shout out the new rock stars because they called out in the end of episode 4 that like when Miss Minutes shuts down and she basically like glitches right before she does and says, "You'll never be him." Like the theory is like that was her putting it in his head that he has to do something heroic, that he has to be worthy, basically, to be this person that they all think he is, kind of thing.
Yeah, because he's a shyster, but he's not he who remains.
Yeah.
He's not like, and I think that also speaks to the.
And so, yeah, him always saying like, "Time to be brave," kind of thing. It was like clearly it's you know going to the lost. It's like he's not the variable that needs to be, you know,
he's not the who.
Fix. He's not Desmond.
Oh my gosh! I just realized
it's not about why.
It's not about
what, where, or why. It's who.
It's who. Oh my gosh! Why are they so damn good?
Layers upon layers.
Layers upon layers, man.
So, yeah. Shout out to Eric Martin and his wonderful writing on this one.
Oh man.
Yeah. Lots of
brilliant writing, brilliant writing, and of course, incredible delivery by just everyone on the cast. It's a perfect cast. Mm-hmm. Owen Wilson just continues to surprise me with this later stage of his career, where he is just able to remain. It's Owen Wilson, but he's playing a specific character. It just happens to be Owen Wilson playing that character, but it's not to the same level of like this character is just Christopher Walken. Mm-hmm. Like there's actually a character there. They just happen to be played by Owen Wilson.
Yeah.
But honestly, I love Mobius. Mobius is one of my favorite characters in the MCU. The way that he is just...
I mean, his scene with Loki, at the like when Loki goes back to like his initial interrogation with him, and we get this tidbit and story, and it's another one of those that like you can read it multiple ways. Like you can read it that Loki's been there enough times that he's heard that story enough to know who Mobius is really talking about. But even if it's like his first time, he knows Mobius enough to know Mobius is talking about himself as the one who blinked, basically, and Renslayer being the one who didn't.
And this is
that was
pre the deception of Renslayer and like the deterioration of their relationship too. So this is still, he's super high up on Renslayer.
Yeah. So yeah, I loved just kind of, I loved how this was willing to take us back to different points in the hierarchy of this show and kind of, and trust that the audience can remember well enough where Loki was at this point in the journey. So that like, cause it's very much like, okay, like I love you got to peek at the set list. How are you doing this kind of thing that Mobius has? But he also acknowledges that he lives and exists in a place that is impossible to exist. So he just goes along with it. He's like, okay, you seem to know what's next, so let's talk. So much good stuff there. Shout out to, again, Eric Martin, who was a staff writer in the first season, wrote a couple of the episodes of the first season, but was very much like the spearhead of this season of the show. And I think that's one of those, like, having such a specific and again, not singular voice, because there were definitely other people that helped write on the show and stuff, but like such a clear vision and throughput of where we wanted to take this season specifically, I think was just a gem. And I just want to shout out that on IMDb, this particular Eric Martin is the XLV8. So he's the 48th. XLVIII. So he's the 48th Eric Martin listed on IMDb. In some capacity.
Shout out.
But yeah, just such a great bit of writing kind of all throughout. So I look forward to seeing, like, I would love to see him, do a Doctor Who episode or something with Russell Davies in some point in the future. Let him be another Stephen Moffat or something. Any other thoughts before we wrap up?
There was no Loki will return.
There was not. Yeah, it's. I mean, I don't. I would say, yeah, that the lack of a post credit sequence is very interesting,
It's jarring.
but at the same time, I mean, there wasn't a post credit sequence for Secret Invasion either.
Yeah, but we don't.
I mean, Secret Invasion at least had one like teed right up with the Marvels, so it's
Yeah.
very weird that they didn't.
It's
have
weird
one
that they
for-
didn't
for
have
Secret Invasion.
this, but this one, it's like it's weird that they.
It's. I mean, it's very
Yeah.
much playing into, I think, the fact that the MCU is probably in a significant state of flux right now,
Yeah.
with movies not performing as well as they would have liked, and the shows probably aren't bringing in the audiences that they want them to bring them in. So they're like, the MCU is just a time and money sink right now, and
It's fair.
as we've seen from a lot of people are superhero fatigued out. That's probably all come to a head this year. So I think the decisions they've been making in recent months, they've been touting in recent months, even prior to the strikes, of, hey, we're pulling back, we're doing fewer shows. Like, I would not be surprised if the Ironheart show never actually like comes to anything. Which would be interesting, or it'd be an extra bummer for any review or rewatch of Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, because one of my least favorite things of that movie was how shoehorned Riri Williams and Ironheart felt into the plot. So I was like, if that never ends up coming to anything, wah wah wah.
Yep.
So yeah, I think it's disappointing that so much of this universe does feel aimless at the moment, but I think this show very much was kind of in similar to how we talked last week with the Guardians. Like, there was such a specific and distinct vision to this show that it didn't need to rely on teases and nods to the future of the MCU like other things might. And so I appreciated that, like, this tells such a great self-contained, with the caveat of, hey, you really need to have watched Loki and like all of Loki's other performances in the MCU to really appreciate where he is and what journey he goes on over the course of this series. But yeah, like, so how the fact that like so much of this season kind of almost comes down to, like, Loki had to go through everything he goes through in this season to see how futile it was trying to save the Loom, so that finally the only option he has is to break the Loom and rebuild something better.
Yeah.
Because it was like, there were theories and thoughts of like, is he gonna go back and basically just replace He Who Remains, and basically like none of season 2 will have ever happened kind of stuff. But I liked this ending and the resolution that we get here. As sad as it is to look at this and think they're probably more or less putting Tom Hiddleston's Loki to bed, like maybe he'll pop up in a Secret Wars or something like that. But if this is the last time we see him, I think it's a hell of a send off, and
incredible send off.
So much great performances from Tom Hiddleston this season, and just the show as a whole, I think. All right, let's go ahead and dive into the report card. We grade from A+ to F. What do you want to give Loki Season 2 here, Cam?
I think it's a pretty solid B+. I'm joking. I cannot even keep that joke up to finish it. It is an A+ all the way.
Yeah.
I can't imagine giving it anything else.
Yeah, A+ for me as well. And it's very much the Loki show as a whole does very much kind of sit there as like one of my favorite MCU things.
Mm-hmm. Like,
it and WandaVision are easily the top of the pile in terms of shows, with maybe like Miss Marvel and She-Hulk below it. But even above just so many of the movies, it is just the shows have the benefit of, we spend so much more time with these characters, so we get so much more of a story told over the course of, I mean, this was effectively what, like it's like 6 movies worth of time with Loki and Tom Hiddleston over the course of 2 seasons there.
Yep.
And
focused on him, not even as a side character.
Yeah. That it's such a joy to, and that's like the potential of the shows is give us more time with these characters, give us like the lives of these characters. And yeah, easy A+ for me as well. Extra credit, other suggestions if you do like this. We have Miss Marvel, Hawkeye, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, WandaVision, What If, Moon Knight, and so that's all the shows that they've got. Then they've got Assembled, The Making of Loki, which is going to be season 1's Making of Loki. And then Thor is the last one they're thrown out there. So there you go. But yeah, other than that, I'd also throw out like, you know, that first Avengers if you want, like Loki is a big bad. And then yeah, he's real good in Dark World and Ragnarok as well, of course.
Yep. I will actually also throw in a tidbit. This is a little side piece that Tom Hiddleston revealed in an interview when they asked they asked him about bulking up for Avengers. He actually revealed that he bulked down in the original Thor movie because Kenneth Branagh told him he needed to lose weight so he looked more hungry. Mm-hmm. Great little bit of trivia. Like Kenneth Branagh, like the problems the Thor film has, it has. However, it is Kenneth Branagh is really, really good about like directing actors in such a spectacular way.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Shout out to Kenneth Branagh.
It's the just the weirdest thing of Thor going back and watching it is the town that looks like it's just a set that they built out in the middle of nowhere. Yep. That you just see the entire breadth of that town when the destroyer comes to deal with it. But yeah, like the performances, the relationship between Chris Hemsworth and Tom Hiddleston, just phenomenal stuff.
Also, we never would have gotten Natalie Portman because she only agreed to do it because Kenneth Branagh. She's like, I want to see what Kenneth Branagh directing a superhero film looks like. There you go. So, yeah.
All right. Extracurriculars. You watch anything else on Disney Plus? No.
We just finished. I'm sure I'll pick something else back up, but this was just like it's weird thing. It's like, what else are you watching? It's like, I don't know. I just was watching this week to week. Yeah. It's been great.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for this episode of That D Plus Show. We should be back next week for Spider-Man Homecoming and then Spider-Man Far From Home to round out, I believe that's going to basically be Thanksgiving week, our time this month here as we revisit some Marvel time. And then we're going to dive into holiday stuff in December, which I believe does say, that's going to be it. Because we'll be back for the 1st of December. So yeah, stay tuned for our return to the Spider-Man stuff, since we've got a couple more Spider-Man movies we can check out now. And then at some point, we'll just all circle back for Spider-Man No Way Home, whenever that makes its way to Disney+. Thank you, Cam, for joining me to discuss Loki Season 2. It was fun watching that last episode there right alongside you. You can follow Cameron at Rev Cabot, 2 B's and 2 T's. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Cam?
Yeah, we just did an episode of That Nerdy Site Show. But I'm also going to give a shout out because I'm pretty sure we're going to be doing a spoiler cast for this next episode of the Marvels. Mm-hmm. So I actually kind of want to do a pseudo shout out into the future for that. Keep an eye out for that. We're going to have Trevor and I watching it tomorrow and we'll be podcasting about it. I don't imagine we'll do like a 10-minute after we finish watching it.
Yeah, probably let ourselves digest a little bit, but we might still record it early compared to when we usually.
Oh, for sure. We got a long weekend. Oh, I have a long weekend ahead of me. You have a regular weekend, but
yeah. All right. You follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. And yeah, in addition to our that Nerdy Site show this last week, as well as next week's, definitely go check out my Baldur's Gate Let's Plays over on youtube.com/thatnerdysite. Tuesdays and Thursdays. We we're just doing Act 3 stuff here. We're nearing the end game. Probably going to go head into a murder tribunal next week. I think that's the next thing that I'm planning on sitting down and recording. We're in the Wild West, though, because I haven't actually sat down and recorded it yet. So I got to do that this weekend, too. Yeah, you can find all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please remember to like, rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, and class dismissed.